What's going on, peeps? It's Wrath here, hanging out today, playing some Idle Heroes. I want to thank you guys so much for coming and hang out with me today. If you liked the video, don't forget, smash that thumbs up button and show your support, and if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe as well. Alright guys, we're here today to continue talking about the best heroes going into 2019, and today, we're going to talk about the Forest faction. Now for me, Forest faction is kind of like home base. This is where I really started learning about the game, because it's like the first place I started orbing and building. So I've played more in the Forest faction than any other faction in the game, so I'm pretty familiar with them. But, little caveat here, Forest faction's not what it was when I started. When I started, it was hands down, no guess, no joke. It was always going to be Forest was the strongest faction to orb in. It was going to give you a wide range of really top tier units like Demon Hunters, VESAs, Heartwatchers, and when Valkyrie dropped, Valkyrie as well. Even Grue back in the day was pretty solid. So it had a really wide range of really useful units. However, recently, the way the meta shifted with E3 units and things like that popping up, while Forest still has some good units, it really only has 2 units that are useful all the way to the end of the game. So we're going to talk about the top units from the Forest faction, and then more of the mid-range heroes that you can use for a large majority of the game. You can still use them, but when you get to the end game, they're just not going to hang, but they're still nice to have early on. And then what's considered primarily fodder. So we'll start things out here with what is obviously everyone's screaming, it's Valk, it's Valk, 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 Valk. Yes, it is. Valk is absolutely the top most used unit probably in the game right now, but also she's definitely the best offering in Forest. Valk's good not just because she's like really tanky, but she's really versatile, and that's really good for any unit. Any unit you can pick up and put in a lot of different areas and have it work really well is awesome. It's nice for a team because they can do a lot of the content. Valkyrie's one of those heroes. She handles the vast majority of content in the game. She can do. She can work in the Aspen dungeon, not so much early on because she doesn't have a lot of heals. When you get her to E3, she just takes off because she'll have a huge health pool with that E3 health and resilience, and she's just really hard to kill. Plus, being as you build her tanky, it compounds on itself. But you take her and throw her in PvP, she also does well. Because she's built so tanky, she can handle hard guild boss fights. A lot of things that other units can't quite do very well, at least not as your only E3. So anyways, we'll talk about Valkyrie in detail here. Let's get to it. First up, her active skill, Flap Dance? I've actually never read that. Oh, that's good. I like her even more now. But anyways, her active skill deals 162% of her attack as damage against 3 random enemies, steals 15% of their attack for 3 rounds, and burns the highest health enemy for 18% of Valkyrie's max health. And this is why you build Valkyrie for HP. You don't put attack stones on Valkyrie, you don't build her for attack, because her damage, while there is damage here, 162% of her attack is damage, her biggest damage is that dot that she puts on, that big burn from her max health. 18% of her health when she has 10 million health in battle is a huge amount of damage. I mean, it's astronomical. It knocks the crap out of people, and that's why you build her tanky. So that's kind of the important thing to take away from here, but also on top of this is that attack steal. It's easily overlooked when you're looking at that massive amount of damage that her burn does, but the attack steal is one of the big reasons she's more useful in boss fights. It's not so much that she does tons of your boss damage, which she will if she's your only E3, but a lot of other E3 units will outdamage a Valkyrie if you can keep them alive. The big thing about her is she actually helps keep your team alive, because she's going to steal the enemy's attack, which means they're not hitting you as hard, and it does make a big difference in boss fights. Actually, it makes a difference pretty much anywhere. Attack steal's never a bad thing. So really solid active skill. Flap Dance, I cannot believe that. How did I never see that? I don't know. I don't look at the names of skills. Anyways, the first passive. This is kind of run-of-the-mill passive, boosting HP, attack, and crit. Crit's kind of a weird one here, because again, the majority of her damage comes from her health dot. It's not really based on her actual damage. I wonder what an attack-built Valkyrie would do. It makes me want to try it out just for funsies. But honestly, like, Valkyrie's big selling point is her damage over time from her HP, so the crit's not super useful. It's not necessarily a bad thing, it's extra damage, but it's kind of a weird, I don't know, kind of strange passive. Doesn't really fit any builds that people use for Valkyrie. Anyways, second passive here, her normal attack, so her basic attack, hits 3 random enemies, deals 95%. 95% what? Her damage. Her attack is damage to 3 random enemies and reduces their attack by 12%, but it's also going to burn them for 6% of Valkyrie's max health. And this again is another reason why you don't really care to build her attack stat up, because her attack's not dealing the bulk of her damage, it's her health. and that's why you always tank out Valkyries, just keep that in mind. But again, even her basic attack has an attack reduction on it. Now this doesn't steal attack, but it does reduce enemies' attack. So Valkyrie is one of the few units that have an attack, I think she might be the only unit. It reduces attack with not only her basic attack, but also her active skill. So she is capable of taking bosses and really dropping their attack damage down, which is why she's really solid in boss fights. Again, it's not necessarily just because of her damage, even though she does do a decent amount of damage, but to me, in most boss battles, Valkyrie is more considered a support unit than a damage dealing unit, because she does support your team a lot with that attack strip. It's a big deal. Now, of course, on certain bosses that have a lot of crowd control, she will deal a lot of damage because she does damage, boop, with her last passive here. When she does get crowd controlled, so silent, stunned, frozen, all that jazz, she's going to heal herself for 200% of her attack continuously for 3 rounds, and she's going to burn 3 random enemies for 3% of her max health. But that's only for 1 round. So essentially, as soon as you crowd control her, she's going to put a little dot on people, hurt them a little bit, but she's also going to heal herself continuously for 3 rounds, and this does stack. So if you stun, silence, and freeze a Valkyrie in the same round, she's going to get 3 different healing buffs popped on her, and she's going to drop 3 different dots on 3 different random enemies 3 different times. So it's pretty powerful of a passive, and she was kind of the big, I guess, stick in the mud for the old meta, where everybody ran AoE crowd control teams. That's all PvP was pretty much, was people trying to get you stunned, frozen, or petrified. That was the entire game plan. It was pretty much just rolling the dice and hoping your crowd control landed. Well, because Valkyrie came out and said, go ahead, stun me, freeze me, I don't care. I actually kind of like it a little bit because I'm dirty. But anyways, it kind of threw a stick in that whole old meta, and that's why she's super popular now, because she was a hard counter to what a lot of people were running, and that's why everybody hates her and loves her. Kind of weird relationship there. But anyways, as you can see, the bulk of her damage is going to come from her HP, and this is what makes her so strong. Because you can pump your Valkyrie to massive amounts of health, like in battle about 10 million health. That's huge when you're talking about the damage being based in her health, but not only that, E3 resilience passives are going to heal her based on her maxed health. It becomes really hard to kill Valkyries, and she deals a lot of damage. So she's really, really strong in a lot of areas of the game, and that's why she's definitely, I would say, the top tier pick from Forest, if not definitely one of the top tier units in the game overall. Really solid unit right now. We'll see what new units bring, because that's how new units do things. They upset the metas. It's kind of the way it is. So you might see your next Forest hero dethrone Valkyrie. You never know. But anyways, for right now, she's definitely top tier. Like I said, Aspen Dungeon, easily capable of Hell Plus, making it to Hell 50. Right now, my record's at Hell 80, and that's with an E3 Valkyrie and E3 Shia. So definitely a solid unit there. When it comes to boss fights, like I said, not the greatest damage output when you compare with actual damage output units like Scaries, etc. But definitely a great support, and if she's your first and only E3, she will do decent damage. She's not going to be like one of those really low damage boss units. It's not her thing. So anyways, really solid all around. PvE, PvP, take your pick. She's going to work there. So like I said, that's why she's in the top part of the list. Moving down, though, the only other unit from Forest you'll actually use all the way up into the end game is Heartwatcher. Now, Heartwatcher is not a PvP-based unit. She is strictly and only built for PvE content. What I mean by that is she really only works against bosses. That's her big role, is she helps your team achieve max boss damage. And that's why she's used all the way to the end game. We take her into broken spaces. She's going to allow you to take those wave 3 bosses down. And that's, it's kind of a requirement for a good boss damage team, is you got to have Heartwatcher. And she flies. So, I mean, win-win. But anyways, Heartwatcher. Active skill, mind torture. She tortures their minds. But she deals 255% of her attack as damage against 2 random enemies, reduces their attack by 25% for 2 rounds, and tags them with the Watcher mark. The Watcher mark on her active skill at 10 star, what it does is it increases the unit's damage taken by 45%, and those Watcher marks will stack up to 300%, and then they stop being effective. They don't keep going, they cap there. So at 300% increased damage taken, you don't get any more buff. But essentially, this active skill is powerful in 2 ways. Straight up, you're getting a damage buff. 45% extra damage taken straight out the gate. That's not bad. But also the attack reduction. 25% attack reduction for 2 rounds. Again, that's really solid when you start fighting bosses that hit really hard. And that's another one of those things like Valkyrie. That's the reason people like Valkyrie in boss fights. It's not necessarily for the damage they potentially do. It's the support they bring to your team. And Heartwatcher is no different. Her support is phenomenal. It's one of the best supports, and it is the best support when it comes to PvE boss damage that you can get. It not only boosts the damage you deal to the boss, but it also reduces the damage the boss deals to your team, and that's why Heartwatcher's just, she's there, okay? She's that top level PvE content. However, you take her into PvP, you're going to regret it because she will get nuked on and do next to nothing. Anywhoos, first passive. Run-of-the-mill passive here, boosting attack, crit, and HP. The crit here is actually kind of important, unlike on Valkyrie where it's not really important. It's not bad, but it's not like actually useful. On Heartwatcher, that crit makes a difference because of the next passive. When she hits a critical strike, she's going to heal herself for 280% of her attack as HP. That's great. It gives her a built-in form of self-sustain, and since you can get pretty high crit on her naturally, she's going to be proccing that, relatively often. So that helps keep her alive, and it works in things like the Aspen Dungeon, but also in boss fights, helps keep Heartwatcher alive without you relying strictly on a healing unit. You can use like a deer monster or whatnot and get around it, but Heartwatcher will heal herself pretty decently to keep herself alive. It's not a bad deal. Not a bad deal at all. Of course, like I said, PvP doesn't matter. She's not a PvP unit, so don't worry about it. And that brings us to her last passive, the Weakness Strike. This goes to her basic attack. It targets 2 random enemies, dealing 110% of her attack as damage, and it's also going to tag them with a Watcher Mark. However, her basic attack's Watcher Mark only adds a 35% increase to the damage taken, whereas her active skill gives 45%. So if you want to maximize the amount of damage your Heartwatcher does, or at least maximize the amount of damage she boosts for your team, you do run an energy artifact on her in guild boss fights, because it lets her drop her active skill round 1, which not only gives you the attack reduction on round 1, which isn't bad, but it's also going to give you the extra 10% damage taken over her basic attack. So the only time this doesn't work is at 9-star. If you have a 9-star Heartwatcher, because this active skill is not as powerful yet, it's still only a 25% damage taken mark, you're actually better off leaving her without the energy artifact, because her basic attack will actually add a larger mark than her active skill does. Just, quick tips. Quick tips there. But anyways, as you can see, Heartwatcher very much built towards long battles, because she's going to stack up stuff over the course. I think it takes 8 rounds for her to get the full damage buff on. Obviously, not a lot of battles in the game are going to go for 8 rounds, other than boss fights. So when it comes to your Marauders, your guild bosses, Pray for Fire, and Broken Spaces, this is where Heartwatcher is a must-have. You've got to have one for top damage. It's a thing. And that's where she works. Now, she can work in the Aspen Dungeon as well, because she does have that crit and that self-heal. However, there's a lot of nodes that give her issues. Heavy damage over time can put her down pretty quick, and field nodes as well. Those fields with those stuns and the assassin stun doesn't play nice with Heartwatcher. But a 10-star Heartwatcher, I know for a fact, can get you to Nightmare in the Aspen Dungeon. I've done it before. However, when it goes beyond to E3 Heartwatcher, I'm not exactly sure where she'd crap out. It'd be fun to see someday, maybe we will. But anyways, Heartwatcher. And now after Heartwatcher, there really isn't, in my opinion, any other in-game units in Forest. Now I know some people will be like, whoa, Wrath, what the crap? There's definitely other good units in Forest. No argument there. There absolutely is, but in my opinion, those are units that work better in the early to the mid-game. Once you go to the late game, they just kind of fall off and they're no longer nearly as useful. So we'll talk about those right now. VESA, obviously the first one that comes to mind, especially a lot of new players are probably like, whoa, my VESA is amazing. She is. Early game to mid game, you're going to love your VESA. I have an E3 VESA, I know. But I also know once you get towards the end game where you're fighting really hard guild bosses, your team's starting to get to E3, she does fall off a lot because her heals do not keep up with the amount of health that E3 units are going to have. Her heals become really small, and they don't really take care of your team like they did early on. Plus, her damage is not nearly as good as a large majority of units are going to be once you get into the E3 realm. My Valkyrie, on most cases, will outdamage my VESA, and she's not really even a super damagey unit for bosses, so she just really falls off in that late game slot. But early to mid game, you're going to love your VESA. Like I said, she's a healer, a team healer on top of that, so she keeps your team alive. When you're fighting your early guild bosses and such, that's going to be a huge deal. I mean, VESA was the first unit that I 10-star, or the first, was she the 10-star? I know she was the first E3 I ever made. I think Grue was my first 10-star. I could be wrong there. Either way, not important. Anyways, she's going to keep your team alive. Obviously, if your team stays alive, you're going to deal more damage to the boss. So she's really nice in PvE areas, even early to mid-game PvP. As long as you're not fighting heavy crowd control on the enemy team, she can nuke pretty hard in the early game. However, like I said, when you get to that E3 realm where you get really big health pools, while VESA can still do damage, it's much less likely that she actually get a chance to, because she'll either get nuked to death or she's going to get crowd controlled, and when she's stunned, she does nothing, and she has no innate resistance to crowd control at all, which means by the time you get to the late game, you don't see a lot of VESAs anymore because they're just not as good as they once were there. So anyways, like I said, still a fantastic unit for the early to mid game. Going to do really nice in the Aspen Dungeon for you. Can easily reach Nightmare. I'd say even Nightmare 50. But she does get a little squishy when you start fighting damage over time nodes. You've got to hope you have Demon Potions on hand to deal with them, or you're going to get wrecked. But yeah, Aspen Dungeon solid. Early to mid game boss fighting, absolutely a great choice. And even PvP, like I said, early on, if you're not fighting a lot of crowd control, she can nuke for you. She's actually a pretty solid AoE nuke. But later game, it just falls off really hard because you get to teams that are actually, built around synergies and strategy, and VESA just doesn't really fit in any of those teams, especially not in a best in slot kind of role. So anyways, definitely a solid choice for the early to mid game, but later down the road, you're probably going to swap her out. Now, who knows? Future updates may change things, but as of right now, January the 20-something of 2019, she's just not top tier. So anyways, moving on, another one that people will be like, whoa, Wrath, Demon Hunter. What about Demon Hunter? She's, fantastic in PvP. Again, yes. Early to mid game, Demon Hunter will do great for you in PvP for a couple of reasons. She has a snowball effect. Whenever she kills enemies, she gets crit damage and attack, which means the more people she kills, the harder she hits. And she can be a very effective AoE nuke if you build her that way. But not only that, she has nice crowd control. That 50% chance to silence targets and it hits the entire enemy team is nice, boosts her control immunity so she can't be controlled, so stunned, frozen, etc. And she also gets 40% reduced damage. You'd be like, wow, Wrath, that seems really powerful. It is. Early to mid game, that is very strong. However, when you get to the late game, silence can actually bite you in the butt far more than it helps you. And people don't seem to understand this, like, well, silence is strong. It can be nice. It can be really nice for holding up your enemy's active skills. The problem is when you silence somebody and they can't cast their active skill, every time they attack somebody with their basic attack or are attacked, any extra energy they get is converted to skill damage on their next cast. So unless you can nuke the entire enemy team, it can only be one unit that gets their active skill off after Demon Hunter's silence wears off, and they can nuke half your team to death in a single shot because all the skill damage you've allowed them to build up. So while silence is really nice early game, and it's fantastic because of the snowball effect, you can kind of just keep rolling through enemies. Later down the road, especially when you fight things like Valkyrie, who's actually just going to heal based off this silence anyways. Yes, you do lower Valkyrie's damage when she's silenced, but she's still going to drop damage on your team, and she's going to heal by a lot, and doesn't really hurt her all that bad. But like I said, as soon as people start getting unsilenced, it goes downhill very quickly. Very, very quickly. Now, she has some semi-burst damage here on her basic attack. She has a pretty high chance to do 200% poison damage, which isn't bad, and a little bit of a silence chance. Not a huge silence chance. 15% is pretty low. But yeah, pretty solid crit and crit damage build on her. So like I said, you can take her in a couple different directions. She's very fast, so you can build her as like a primarily crowd control unit. And it works. It works great early to mid game. But like I said, when you get to that late game area where you're starting to see best in slot units rise up, if you're building a rainbow team, odds are Demon Hunter's not going to be your forest pick. It's going to be Valkyrie. You're not going to take the lesser of the two unless you have no other option. And that's what I'm saying. When you get those in-game teams, these, good units that are not bad units don't get chosen over the best units, and that's kind of how it runs. So early to mid game, fantastic PvP unit. You're going to absolutely love her. She will destroy people, but she won't handle Valkyries all that well. It's just not going to work for you that great. But anyways, that's Demon Hunter. She's definitely not a PvE fighter when it comes to guild bosses. Very low damage. Aspen Dungeon, literally zero use. She's strictly a PvP unit. And like I said, for the vast majority of the game, she's going to work just fine there. But when you get to the end game, it's probably time to go ahead and swap her out for a Valkyrie and, continue the streak upwards. But there you go. Those are I would say the most used when it comes to the Forest faction is these four. Other mid-tier units that do have some use would be, in my opinion, Grue and Rosa. You don't see a lot of them, mainly because Rosa's kind of replaced by either Belrain or Cruz when it comes to a support role. He's not bad. He has some good use on teams. The reduced damage when he gets hurt below 50% health, it's definitely not bad. It boosts your entire team's survivability. He does reduce armor with his basic attack, which isn't a bad deal. But he also removes enemy attack and boost your own team's attack with his active skill. So he has a lot of support going on for him. It's not bad. But when you get later on in the game, since Rosa does not transition well to PvP, You primarily see Cruz filling this role or Belrain, because Belrain also has attack buffs and such like that, but also heals, gives a little bit more to your team, and Cruz kind of the same story, has that big heal based on HP percentage, so you see Rosa kind of fall off near the end, but still a solid PvE support unit for early to mid game. Not going to really hurt you to build him because you can either, regress him or convert him later. It's not a big deal. Any hoodles, and that brings us to Grue. Grue used to be a lot better than he is now, not because he's changed a whole lot, but because the game has changed around him. Grue is really tanky. That's kind of Grue's bread and butter, is he has a high amount of base reduced damage. You can get this guy to well over 50% reduced damage, which means he takes about half damage when he gets hit, which is, obviously nice. He has a little counterattack built in, doesn't do a lot of damage, but it's just extra little DPS. Not bad. But the big thing is he reduces targets' attack and crit when they attack him. So as a frontline tank, Grue used to be really annoying to fight because you'd make your entire team hit less hard and crit less often, which drops your overall DPS. So he used to be pretty solid in a lot of different areas. However, now that Valkyrie targets really high HP units, Grue's kind of like the front runner to get shot by that. He's like, oh, hey, what's up? I have high HP. And then that huge, nasty damage over time effect hits him, and damage over time is not affected by reduced damage. So her big, heavy, nasty dot goes directly through that reduced damage and really puts a hurting on Grue's. But his active skill is also not bad. He absorbs armor, which means he kind of gets a little bit tankier himself, while making, I don't know why it says absorb. Berea says he steals the armor. I believe that's what absorb says here, is actually stealing armor from the dude. It might not. I haven't tested Grue out in forever. It's been ages since I've had one. But either way, the extra armor is nice. And he does get a little heal based off of it too, but his heal's based in his attack, so it's incredibly low. I mean, that's just how it is. It's not a big heal. His biggest heal comes from resilience, and Grue actually was pretty solid in the Aspen dungeon at E3, because you couldn't hardly kill the guy. I mean, he had super high health, super high reduced damage. You just couldn't take the Grue monster down. He could make it all the way to hell mode, back when that was a really big achievement. But the thing is, he has no attack. So any kind of healing nodes, he just can't handle and stuff like that. So he kind of fell out of the meta. Still a cool unit, I think, but like I said, he's more of a mid-tier beginner unit now than he's going to be. You just don't see him in the late game anymore. And with that said, everybody else is pretty much fodder. Dragon Slayer, you get them all the time. Yes, you can build them. Like I said, you can build any hero you want. That's one thing I want you guys to keep in mind here. This little list of heroes is A, it's my opinion, but B, it's not definitive. It doesn't mean that you can't build anything else because I said it wasn't in-game viable. If you love Molasses, you should build Molasses. That's just, it's a game. You're supposed to have fun with it. That's the entire point. So just because someone like Dragon Slayer is not considered a top tier unit doesn't mean you should never build one if you really like him. That would just be, I don't know, it's like telling someone how to play a game is ridiculous to me. I don't like backseat gamers. They annoy the crap out of me. Play the game the way you want to play it. And if your goal is to do the best in the game, you're going to build units that reflect that. But if your goal in the game is to have fun and enjoy your time, your builds are going to reflect that too. So just keep that in mind. There really isn't a wrong way to play a game because in the end, it's playtime. But overall, generally, Dragon Slayer, Faceless, Starlight, Melassa, Rosa, and Edga, and like I said, even Grue, are primarily used as food. And when you get to the end game, you'll start seeing Demon Hunters get foddered out and converted into Valkyries because she's more of a top tier unit. And even VESA becomes more of a fodder tier unit in the end game. But like I said, early to mid game, honestly, you can get away with building pretty much anything. I'll be honest with you. An E3 Dragon Slayer, if it's your first E3 unit, will probably carry you to hell in the Aspen Dungeon. He's got a huge amount of health. He burns when he gets hit. He's just kind of like a little bomb. And he's actually really fun to play with. I've built one before back when I used to do seasonal, and he's actually a fun unit. He's got a lot more utility early to mid game than people give him credit for. But of course, when you get to the end game, he just, no, he's not super useful there anymore. I don't know about Faceless. She's kind of butt all the way around. But again, if you love, I don't know if Faceless is a she or a he. It's a she. It's a lady. Okay. Mystery solved. Faceless is a lady. But anyways, just not that great of a unit overall. Same with Starlight. They're not top tier units. Again, like I said though, if you want to build them, you can. There's no law that says you cannot build a unit that you want to build just because you want to build it. And the way the game's structured now, with the ability to go through and say, like, I don't really care if my VESA, eventually she will be foddered out for me. I could take her into Convert, and I can swap her to another Valkyrie if I had the copies, or I could just regress her all the way back to nothing, get all her copies back, and get all the food that I put into her back, minus like 3 5-stars, and reinvest all that fodder into somebody else. So you're not really stuck with any unit that you build, and that's one thing to take away from this, is even if you build a unit that's not considered top tier, if you take a Dragon Slayer all the way to E3, you're not stuck with them. It's not like when you get to the end game, you're like, oh my god, I've ruined my entire account. No, you just swap the guy out or regress him and use his fodder somewhere else. It's not that big of a deal. So anyways, that is going to be it for today, though, guys. We talked about everybody in... We're loading something here. What are we loading? I don't know. My mouse is telling me it was thinking about something. But anyways, that is it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked the video, please make sure, smash that thumbs up button and show your support if you haven't already. Don't forget to subscribe as well, and tell your friends about it, because that definitely helps me out a lot. And I will see you guys in the next one.